Hey guys, it's Mr. Williams with your video on the third grade level skill for the equations unit. We are dealing with percents inside of equations now. If you've been in my class, then you might remember that we've talked about percents as they deal with proportions, but now we're dealing with them in equations. Before we jump into the template for this and get into some examples of actual equations that you guys will need to do, I think it would be a good use of a little bit of time to just review how to go from a percent to a decimal and then back. So my memory trick for this is to think about the words decimal and percent. If you think about the alphabet, you've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and then the rest of it. But point is, in the alphabet, D comes before P. If you were to look up the two words in the dictionary, decimal would come before percent. So the trick, or the way that leads into the trick that I have, is that if we have a decimal place, wherever that decimal place is in our number, whether it's on a percent or on just a decimal number, even if we have to kind of make one up and put one down where there isn't one, if we want to go from a decimal to a percent, we move the decimal to the right. And if we want to go from percent to decimal, we move it to the left, just like in the dictionary. D is going to come to the left of P, or like before P, but you get the idea. So if I have 30% and I want to turn that to a decimal, I'm going to move that decimal 2 places. I move it 1, 2 places over, and this is 0.30, also known as 0.3. 1, 2 places to the left will take me from 25% to the decimal form of 0.25. And then this one, 9%, is a little bit tricky because we have to kind of make up a space that isn't there, and we have to put a 0 down. So this is 0.09. It's not 0.9. 0.9 is very different. So again, to go from percent to decimal, we need to take the decimal place and move it left, just like how we would go left in the alphabet to get from P's to D's. All right, then we have 0.18, or then we have a bunch of decimals that will turn into percents, and we're just going to go the other way. We move this decimal right 1 spot, 2 spots, and it's 18%. We have another decimal on 0.4 that we move 1 spot and then 2 spots again. We have to make up a 0 there. So that's 40%. And then we have 1, 2 spots to the right gets us 3%. So I've given a quick example of a few different types of these that you could see. The reason why this is so important is that when we get into equations with percents, we will have to go back and forth between a percent and a decimal. But before we get into actual problems, I want to just talk about the template. Now, let me go ahead. You don't have to write this down because it's in brown, but you probably remember, I know how big letters should be, is over of equals percent over 100. You probably remember this proportion, and you probably remember that being what all you need to write down. When we use the equation, it's a little bit different. They're in a bit of a different order. Your of number comes first. Your is number is at the end. In the middle, you have to put the decimal form of whatever percent you're dealing with. This is where the back and forth comes from. If you're given a percent, you have to turn it to a decimal. If you're finding a percent, you have to get the decimal from the equation and then turn it back into a percent. The memory trick that I use for this, if you remember Garfield cartoons, Odie was the very stupid dog. And of number, decimal number, is number, make up the first 3 letters of Odie. So just remember the stupid dog from Garfield if you want to think through the order you should write these equations in. Let's go ahead and actually use this in a couple of examples. There are 3 different types of problems that you could deal with. The first one is actually the easiest because it just involves a calculation. You don't even have to think of an equation. because if I see what is, that tells me that I don't know my is number. My is number is my variable, and I won't even write a letter here. I will just put a question mark down because I can go ahead and plug in 20 for my of number. And then my percent number, I would need to take 30% and turn it to a decimal. So I would need to turn it into 0.3 or 3/10. Now, if I have a calculator, I can just go ahead and figure this out. 20 times 0.3, what is that? Yep, that is 6. So 6 is 30% of 20. Next, I have a similar one. What is 75% of 24? If I remember OD, then my of number is going to come first. The decimal equivalent to my percent number is going to come second. So I took 75% and I turned it into 0.75 or 75 hundredths. And then my is number has what next to it? So that's what I don't know. All I have to do is do 24 times 0.75 and I should get 18. So 18 is 75% of 24. And I'm not going through the actual calculating process because I've done these already, and these are the types of problems that you can do in your calculator, or you can even try to do the multiplication by hand. That would be very impressive. All right, but next, it's changed a little bit. Now we're in 12 is what percent of 16? So if I write out my equation frame, and if I remember OD, my of number, I still know that's 16. But now my percent number is what I don't know. So I will go ahead and call that P. And then my is number was 12. So 16 times some decimal is 12. If I use the idea of an equation, whether I rearrange or whatever I can do, I will go ahead and just demonstrate the dividing method first because we can kind of flip these around a little bit. I can divide by 16, divide by 16. 16 divided by 16 cancels. The number that I called P is 0.75, but this is a decimal. I need to find percent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that decimal and I'm going to go to the right in the alphabet. I'm going to go to the right in the number. 1 spot, 2 spots. That's 75%. So 12 is 75% of 16. Next example of this, 25 is what percent of 50? I'll go ahead and write my equation frame. I will fill in my OD numbers. My of number is 50. My percent number, I don't know, so I'll call it P. My is number was 25. 50 times something is 25. I can go ahead and do a quick bit of division. I can divide by 25, and you can rearrange if you want to. No, wait, no, I'm dividing by 50. Yeah. I pressed the thing a couple too many times. All right. Sorry, dividing by 50, dividing by 50. Thought something looked wrong. But again, you can use the rearranging trick. I'm just using this as an opportunity to show that even if P is in the middle, as long as it's multiplied, we can still do the dividing trick like normal. All right, so 50 divided by 50 cancels. I end up with P equals, and then 25 divided by 50, if you plug that in the calculator, you should get 0.5. Once again, this is just a decimal. It's not a percent yet. So I need to move that decimal 1, 2 spots over, create the 0, and that's 50%. All right, so that was the second example of that type of problem. It looked just like the first one. Again, with these, we didn't know our percent, so we had to find the decimal and then turn it back into a percent. We had to move that decimal 2 spaces to the right to go right in the alphabet and right in the number. So now we have our last type of problem where we don't know our of number. So once again, I will do the same first step that I've always done. I will set up my equation frame. I will plug in my OD numbers. Of is what I don't know, so I will go ahead and call that n, just for the sake of using a letter that isn't x, because I already have a multiplication sign. I need my percent changed to a decimal. So I move that decimal 2 spaces to the left, and that's 0.75, or 75 hundredths. And now I need my is number, which is 24. All right, so now I have my variable, and this looks a lot more like the easier to work with equations. It looks a little more familiar, because all I have to do is draw my line, divide by 0.75, divide by 0.75. 0.75 divided by 0.75 is going to cancel. And then all I have to do is find 24 divided by 0.75. If I plug that in the calculator, that should get me an answer of 32. So 24 is 75%. 24 is 3/4, if you remember, or 3/4 of 32. Now for that last example, 18 is 60% of what number? Once again, I will start my equation frame. I will plug in my OD. I don't know of, so I'll call that n. My percent, I need to change to a decimal, so I put a decimal place down, or a decimal down, move it 2 places to the left, and that gets me to 0.6. And then finally, my is number was 18. So some number times 0.6 is 18. I can solve this one exactly like the other one. I just have my variable, and I have multiplying next to it. Divide by 0.6, divide by 0.6, times 0.6 and divide by 0.6 cancel, leaving me with n equals, and if you plug this in your calculator, 18 divided by 0.6, you should get an answer of 30. All right, so that is it for this idea. I know this was a little bit long, but I trust y'all to get your work done and everything like that. So best of luck, and thanks for working so hard.